Hey YouTube, thanks for joining me again on this video. There's not going to be a lot of action. It's going to be mostly me talking and some pictures. But it's also somewhat important that I do this to give you a background on what I'm doing. I've long needed a building that can accommodate all of my hobbies, from railroad cars to tractors to blacksmithing. Currently on my property I had 3 buildings that met none of those needs. It's been long since been a goal of mine to get one building that can accommodate all of my hobbies and keep all of my stuff in one area, safe, secure, and out of the weather. And also a place that I can do projects in, as far as taking apart an engine or working on something mechanical. I was never really able to do that anywhere but my driveway, which is cold in the winter and dead hot in the summertime. And also I wanted to get away from the annual practice of my trip up north to my buddy Pete's house to store my rail car and trailer for the winter time. As you can see here, we get quite a bit of snow here in Massachusetts, and we get a blizzard. That Shelter Logic building is pretty much inundated, and they are temporary structures, and I use this building well beyond what it was designed and made to do. And you can see the small tool shed to the left under the snow. That was built fairly cheaply and only to really store snow shovels in the wintertime. So as I said, my goal has been to avoid going up north and having to borrow space from my buddy Pete, who's a great guy, but I hate keep bothering him every winter. In the backyard was this shed that you've seen in other videos. This shed was built in the 80s and was never really maintained, and the floor was starting to show signs of rot, and it was also very small and packed to the gills, and was not really adequate for the needs that I had, and could only really fit the Cub Cadet XT1 in just barely. I had to fold up the grass deflector to fit it in there. So I have been on the eye and looking for a shed to replace all 3 with one. As part of my search, I looked at a lot of shed manufacturers in this area, but a lot of them did not meet the requirements that I had. One of the things I wanted is I did not want trusses in my shed. I also wanted a gable end door. And also cost was an issue. I didn't have almost $10,000 to dump on a shed. So while I was at one of the county fairs, I happened to be walking around and I noticed this shed from the Jamaica Cottage shop up in Vermont. And for a fair price, they were able to deliver it to my front door and customize it to my needs. After several phone calls to the Jamaica Cottage shop and emails, I figured out that they could build a building to my specification at a reasonable cost. With that information in hand, I went to my local building department. After talking to the inspector and finding out what legal requirements were needed on my lot, I drew a scale drawing of where the shed would be located, including all pertinent setbacks and property lines. And with that plan drawn up and to scale, I went and talked to the inspector again. And after telling him what I wanted to do and showing him a copy of the building plan, he issued me a permit to start building. I always recommend doing things legal the first time, and it basically future-proofs your project. With an ETA of 4 weeks, I had to get cracking on construction, or more so demolition. First part was removing the Shelter Logic building and the tool shed, opening up this 12-foot section of fence and removing the previous gates, moving the rail car to the front yard on temporary track for storage until the building arrived. I also then emptied out the shed out back, and it's amazing how much stuff you accumulate inside of a shed until you have to take it apart and it's spewed everywhere. I excavated out the concrete block that was the ramp and with the help of my buddy Matt, we demolished the shed and loaded it onto my trailer in 2 loads to take it to the dump to dispose of it. From there, I began digging. I drew out the lines with spray paint based on my plot plan that I had from the property lines, taking several measurements to make sure I was correct. Once that was done, I drove in stakes and began digging. For a class of 1974 member, this Cub Cadet loader sure did a great job excavating that hole. The shed company recommended a 3-inch gravel pad, but where I'm going to be having a lot of weight on this particular building, I decided to go down a foot. So I dug out a 1-foot deep hole with my loader, and then there's something I forgot about. After excavating all the deleterious material off, all the grass and the sod, and getting into the soil, I realized that I had a lot more spoil from this digging than I thought I would. So after several nights of digging and using my XT1 as the dump truck, I found a low spot in my yard to start dumping a lot of this extra soil. When you start on a digging project, you definitely have to remember that you have to get rid of this stuff. It's easy to dig the hole when you got a front end loader, but then it's not always easy to get rid of the material that follows behind. So if you're going to start on a digging project, definitely consider that. As you can see here, I had a nice low spot in my yard from a few tree stumps that were starting to deteriorate over the years. So I was able to use the loader to spread out the dirt and kind of make a nice new flat area. But that should be a consideration in any project that you do. With the hole finally dug to my specification, I decided to give the tractors a break for a couple days as we had some serious rain. A few days later, I picked up where I left off, and a friend of mine let me use his dump truck. This was a tremendous asset. It really saved me some money in the cost of stone delivery, and I also didn't know how much stone I was going to need exactly because I was building on a little bit of a slope. So trying to make a firm calculation on stone needs was somewhat difficult because of the slope of the yard, and then also the fact that I had a little bit of a drainage hole I put in the middle. The stone I'm using here is 3/4 crushed stone, and I chose this stone because it does compact a little bit easier. It's easier to manipulate with a shovel and by hand, and also my front end loader. The 1.5-inch stuff is fine, but I just don't feel it compacts enough, or enough to say to prevent settling. So I used the 3/4 crushed stone. All in all, I used a little over 5 yards of stone. I was very, very fortunate to have this dump truck though, because when I did the patio project out back, I loaded all that stone into my truck, the pickup, and that really did crush the suspension. It also made life a lot easier because I didn't have to sit there and shovel all that stone out of the truck. With the simple push of a button, I was able to back up to the hole and just dump 3 yards at a time into the hole. And then in between loads, I would use my front end loader to push out the stone, and then I'd take a hose and hose it down to settle it a little bit and then drive it over with the tractor. I did that twice, and then I took a screed board and leveled out the stone for the final perfect level grade. There were a few aspects of this project where I went over budget, and one of them was stone. I only had budgeted $100 or so for stone, but where I was going to have so much weight with a railroad car, and I had already spent the money to upgrade the shed to have 3 skids as opposed to the 2, and 12-inch joists to support the weight of the tractors, the loader, and also the rail car, and anything else I could ever stuff in there in the future. I said, you know what, now's not the time to cheap out on stone. So Here you see the first load going in the hole, and I will say that the dump truck made life so much easier for me. And as you can tell, I've never used a dump truck before this, so I wasn't sure how much I actually had to raise it for all the stone to come out. Well, anyway, guys, thanks for watching my video. Stay tuned for part 2, where the shed gets delivered and we get to see the shed delivery machine in action. And as always, please like, click, and subscribe to my videos. Thanks, and bye-bye.